Can you believe that back in 2018, the global fast food industry was like estimated to be worth around $570 billion?
Wow. That's, yeah, that's a huge number.
It really is. Let's really dig into that because today on the deep dive, we're not just skimming the surface. We want to go deep into the history, the economics, and, well, the massive cultural footprint of fast food.
Exactly. We've got a lot of material here looking at everything from, what makes food fast in the first place to the huge global web of a company like McDonald's.
Right.
So, our goal with this deep dive really is to understand the forces, the mechanisms that have made fast food just everywhere in modern life.
Mm-hmm.
We'll trace it back, look at some surprisingly old origins, and follow it right up to today, the global phenomenon it is now, and all the debates around it.
Yeah, what is fast about fast food? Where did it come from? What's the impact?
That's what we want to unpack.
Absolutely. So we're starting with the basics, defining fast food using a kind of broad overview source we have. And then, yeah, we'll zoom right into McDonald's, their history, their influence. It's quite a story.
Definitely. I think there'll be some surprising connections and maybe a few aha moments for you listening.
I hope so. Okay, so groundwork first. What actually is fast food? What are the key things?
Well, the sources point to a few core ideas. It's going to be mass produced, right, for a commercial resale. And the big one, speed of service is absolutely key.
Speed is paramount.
Yeah. And commercially, the definition often includes things like using frozen, preheated, or pre-cooked ingredients. And it's typically served in packaging that's ready for takeout, ready to go.
Right, that makes sense. And its original purpose, you mentioned commuters, travelers.
Exactly. Busy people.
Yeah.
Commuters, travelers, wage workers who just didn't have much time for a meal break. That was the initial driver.
And you mentioned different levels of fast. It's not all the same.
No, not quite. You've got your truly instant stuff,
Mm.
maybe fully pre-cooked meals. You just heat up, grab and go. Okay.
But then you have places like McDonald's or Burger King are good examples that work a bit differently. They use all those pre-prepped ingredients, the bagged buns, frozen patties, pre-sliced lettuce, tomatoes, whatever.
Yeah.
But the key things, like the burger patty itself or the fries, they're usually cooked to order.
Ah, right. So it's assembled quickly, but there's still that final cooking step.
Exactly. It's a kind of balance,
Yeah.
trying to keep the speed but have some element of freshness right at the end.
Still focus on getting it out the door fast, though. And the drive-through, that feels like the classic image.
Oh, definitely. That's a huge feature, especially in the U.S. But the sources also mention, the range of places. Simple stands, kiosks with no seats at all, right up to your typical quick service restaurant with tables inside.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to talk about franchising. That model is so central. It lets them ship standardized food items from central locations out to all the different restaurants.
Ensuring consistency everywhere. Right, consistency and rapid expansion. Because local owners put up the capital, but they follow the main company system, use their brand. It was pretty revolutionary for growth.
Makes total sense. Efficiency, consistency, replication. But you hinted earlier, this isn't just a 20th century invention, this idea of quick, ready food.
Not at all, not even close. If you go way back, think ancient Rome. You had street stands everywhere. They were like these large counters, often with holes or receptacles built in, serving food and drink.
Really?
Yeah. For people living in the cities, especially in those, multi-story apartment buildings, the insulae, these vendors were essential. They'd buy things like bread soaked in wine for breakfast,
Wow.
cooked vegetables, stews from places called papine. It was everyday food for many urban Romans.
So even way back then, city life created this need for quick, accessible food. Was it just Rome?
Nope. Fast forward a bit, maybe 12th century China, you see things like fried dough, different soups, stuffed buns being sold as basically early snack foods, things you could grab and eat easily.
Huh. Fried dough and stuffed buns sound pretty familiar.
They do, don't they? And around the same time, over in Baghdad, people were buying processed legumes, starches, even ready-cooked meats to add to what they made at home. So, again, convenience food in cities.
It really seems universal, this need in urban settings. What about, say, medieval Europe, closer to our time?
Well, medieval London, Paris, filled with street vendors selling pies, pasties, flans, waffles, pancakes, cooked meats, loads of options.
Who were they selling to, mainly?
A lot of people who just didn't have cooking facilities at home. Think single people in lodgings or travelers, like pilgrims on a journey. If you didn't have a kitchen, these vendors were your lifeline.
Right. If you haven't got your own fireplace or oven, you're buying ready-made food. So the cities themselves, their density, really pushed this along.
Oh, absolutely. More people crammed into smaller spaces, often without decent kitchens. Plus, think about the cost of fuel wood or charcoal back then. Sometimes it was actually cheaper to buy food already cooked.
That's a really interesting point, the fuel cost.
And safety, too. Lots of individual fires in tightly packed wooden buildings. That's a huge fire risk.
Yeah, you can see why authorities might even encourage buying things like bread or noodles pre-made.
Exactly. So it's this mix of practicality, cost, safety, all pushing towards buying ready-cooked food. And it serves those people we mentioned before, the commuters, the workers on short breaks.
Makes perfect sense. So that sets the stage. Now let's jump forward. The big explosion seems to happen after World War II, particularly in America.
That's when it really takes off in the way we recognize today. You have the post-war economic boom, people have more money to spend, consumer culture is growing,
Right.
and crucially, more women are entering the workforce.
Which means less time at home for things like, well, cooking elaborate meals.
Precisely. So eating out starts to shift. It goes from being a luxury, a special treat, to something much more routine, even a necessity for busy working families.
The demand for quick, cheap lunches and dinners just skyrockets.
It does. And you start to see that traditional family dinner, everyone around the table, it gets replaced more and more often by takeaway fast food.
The huge cultural shift.
Massive. And the stats back it up. By 2013, one source notes the average American woman spent only about 47 minutes a day preparing food. For men, it was just 19 minutes.
Wow, 19 minutes. That really paints a picture of how our relationship with food prep has changed. Okay, so let's hit some key moments. Where did modern fast food really start to take shape?
Well, the UK has a strong claim with fish and chips, starting way back in the 1860s. There's actually a blue plaque in Oldham marking one of the first shops.
Fish and chips, a true classic.
Absolutely. It was cheap, it was wrapped up so you could take it away easily, perfect for the Victorian working class, especially as the Industrial Revolution was transforming society.
So it fueled the workforce.
In many ways, yes. And it spread like wildfire. By 1910, over 25,000 fish and chip shops in the UK. By the 1920s, maybe 35,000.
Incredible growth.
Yeah, and you get famous names like Harry Ramsden's starting up in 1928. They apparently set a record in 1952 serving 10,000 portions in one day.
Good grief, that's a lot of fish.
It certainly is. And of course, the UK developed other regional fast foods like the Cornish pasty. And later you see the adoption of things like pizza, kebabs, curry becoming popular takeaway options, even deep-fried Mars bars, though maybe that's more niche.
Maybe just a bit. Okay, what about the U.S. side?
In the U.S., the big catalyst after World War I was the car. The rise of the automobile led directly to drive-in restaurants.
Ah, the drive-in.
Yeah. And then you get White Castle, Wichita, Kansas, 1921. They're generally credited as the first real fast food outlet, the first hamburger chain.
And they were cheap.
Super cheap. Burgers were just 5 cents. Their whole model was limited menu, high volume, low cost, high speed.
The formula.
Exactly. And they did something clever. They designed their places so customers could actually see the food being prepared, build trust, show it was clean.
That was smart. Transparency.
Very smart for the time. And their success, naturally, spawned a lot of imitators.
Right. And this is where franchising really comes into its own. How did these chains get so big?
Franchising was the engine for growth. A&W Root Beer used it first, apparently, back in 21, just for their syrup.
Huh.
But Howard Johnson's in the mid-1930s, they really pioneered the franchised restaurant concept. Standard menu, standard signs, standard advertising, the whole package.
Just Hojas set the template.
Pretty much. It
Yeah.
let them expand rapidly because local operators used their own money but followed the established successful system, lower risk for the main company.
Makes sense. And before franchising was huge, you mentioned curb service.
Yeah, that started in the late 1920s. People would just pull up in their cars. And then in the 40s, you get that iconic image of car hops on roller skates bringing food right to the car window.
Roller skates. Definitely an image that sticks. Okay, so fascinating history. Let's bring it to the more recent past and present. The economic power here is just immense, right?
Oh, it's staggering. The U.S. still has the largest single fast food industry globally. American chains are everywhere, over 100 countries.
And that $570 billion figure from 2018.
Right. And in the U.S. alone, think about employment. Around 5.4 million people worked in food prep and service jobs back in 2018. Consumer spending. It hit $160 billion in 2012. Compare that to just $6 billion in 1970.
That trajectory is unbelievable.
It really is. Although, interestingly, traditional fast food has lost a bit of ground recently into what they call fast casual dining.
Like Chipotle or Panera?
Exactly. Places that offer something maybe a bit higher quality, a bit more customization, but still relatively quick.
But still, the core fast food demand seems pretty solid.
Yeah, in the US at least, it seems quite inelastic, meaning people keep buying it even when the economy dips. But it's not evenly spread.
How so?
Well, one source used Los Angeles County as an example, found a much higher density of fast food places in South Central LA compared to the wealthier West Side. Raises questions about food deserts, access, socioeconomic links.
Interesting. And the workforce itself?
Very young, typically. Median age for a U.S. fast food worker in 2023 was just 22. And labor costs are a huge chunk of expenses for these places, roughly a third. Globally, the market was still growing strongly, around 4.8% back in 2006.
Okay. Colossal industry. Huge workforce. Let's pivot specifically to McDonald's now. It's almost impossible to talk about fast food without talking about them.
It really is. They're kind of the archetype. Fun fact. The oldest McDonald's still operating is in Downey, California, opened in 1953.
Still going. And their numbers today are just mind-boggling.
Yeah, look at 2023 figures. Operating income over $11 billion, net income nearly $8.5 billion, total assets $56 billion, and they employ around 150,000 people directly.
Just massive. And they haven't stood still visually either, have they? The look has changed.
Not at all. Remember that big Forever Young redesign back in 2006? Trying to look more like a coffee shop, more sophisticated, wood tones, muted colors.
I do remember that shift, but maybe even more interesting is how they tweak the menu everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. That's crucial to their global dominance. They adapt to local tastes incredibly well. You get soup on the menu in parts of Asia, McReese in Indonesia.
McReese?
Yeah, ebi burger, that's a shrimp burger, in Singapore and Japan.
Right.
Fried dough buns and soybean milk for breakfast in China.
It's smart. Makes it feel less like an American import.
Exactly. It's deep localization. It helps the brand feel like part of the local scene, not just something imposed from outside.
And they're even doing health-focused things in some places,
Well,
like in India.
Yes, that's quite recent, September 2024. They introduced buns made with millet, working with a research institute there. Higher calcium, iron, protein, tapping into local grains and health trends.
That's pretty innovative.
And even within the U.S., you see regional specials. Like they have a Hatch Green Chili double cheeseburger only in New Mexico. Shows they listen to local preferences even domestically.
And what about those broader menu changes? Healthier options, ingredients?
Yeah. Around 2015, they made a noticeable push. Took high fructose corn syrup out of the buns, removed artificial preservatives from chicken McNuggets, things like that, trying to address some of those health concerns.
And they always have the limited time offers, the seasonal things.
Keeps it fresh. McRib, Shamrock Shake, people anticipate those. And globally, the variations continue. Beer in Germany, apparently. They had meat pies in New Zealand for a while. Big Macs with tzatziki sauce and grus.
Tzatziki Big Mac. I'm intrigued. And the whole family angle, the playgrounds.
Always been huge for them. The original outdoor playlands, then they moved indoors to the softer play places in the 80s, probably for safety and weather reasons.
Makes sense.
And they keep trying new engagement things, Happy Meal boxes that become VR goggles in Sweden,
Yeah.
a McTrax recording studio thing in the Netherlands, even a McBoat drive-through or sail-through in Hamburg.
A McBoat. Seriously.
Apparently so. And now they're testing that new concept, Hasam Sekis, smaller places focused heavily on drinks. Started testing late 2023.
That's always evolving. Financially, you mentioned the big numbers. They're seen as a really solid investment, right?
Yeah, they're what's called a dividend aristocrat. Means they've increased their dividends to shareholders for over 25 years straight. Very reliable in that sense, consistently high on the Fortune 500.
Impressive. Did they ever stumble?
They had a few bumps. A monthly sales drop in 2012, first in 9 years. A quarterly drop in 2014, first in 17 years. And drive-through is so important for them. In the U.S., like 70% of sales.
50%.
Huge. And interestingly, in 2015, the total number of McDonald's restaurants in the U.S. actually went down for the first time since 1970. Maybe market saturation, maybe shifting strategy.
That is interesting. And what's this about them being a real estate company?
Well, that's a fascinating angle. They own a lot of the land their restaurants sit on. The value is estimated around $42 billion.
Wow.
And a big chunk of their revenue actually comes from the rent they charge their franchisees. There was even talk a while back about spinning off the U.S. real estate into a separate company, a REIT, but they decided against it.
So a huge part of the business isn't even burgers, it's property.
It's a major component, definitely. And the sheer scale of their employment impact. Eric Schlosser's book, Fast Food Nation, famously estimated nearly 1 in 8 American workers had worked at McDonald's at some point.
1 in 8. That's incredible.
It shows their reach. They've even had interesting employee wellness suggestions over the years, singing, going to church. And they're the biggest private playground operator in the U.S. Huge buyer of beef, pork, potatoes, apples.
Their influence just ripples outwards. Has it always been seen negatively, or are there positive impacts cited?
Some sources suggest they've actually helped raise service standards in markets they enter, like improving restroom cleanliness standards in Hong Kong, apparently. And they partner with big local companies like Sinopec in China for drive-thrus.
Adapting and influencing.
Yeah, they have state-owned franchises in Beijing, a restaurant inside the Louvre in Paris, and vegetarian-only restaurants in India, starting in Amritsar in 2012. Huge adaptation.
But they've also had to pull back or rebrand due to politics.
Yes, recent examples in Russia where it became Vkusno i Tochka in Kazakhstan, now called I Am Geopolitics, directly impacting their brand presence.
And automation, that must be a big focus for them.
Definitely. They were testing e-clerks way back in 1999. More recently, those create-your-taste self-order kiosks started appearing around 2016.
Right, I've used those.
And academic studies, like one from Oxford, predict a very high chance of automation for food prep and serving jobs generally. It could really change the workforce in fast food.
You can see it coming. But they've faced pushback on the labor front, haven't they?
Oh, yes. Lots of issues raised, especially in the U.S. Health and safety complaints, stories about treating burns with condiments. The whole Fight for $15 campaign for higher wages has heavily involved McDonald's workers.
Right.
And you see labor disputes in other countries, too. France, South Korea. The use of zero-hour contracts in the U.K. was a big controversy for a while.
Or zero-hour
Basically, contracts where the employer doesn't guarantee any minimum number of work hours. Makes income very unpredictable for workers. McDonald's UK did offer workers the option of fixed contracts later on, though.
And there's the issue of low wages leading to workers needing public assistance.
Yeah, studies suggested U.S. fast food workers relied on billions in public assistance annually, simply because wages were often too low to cover basic living costs.
That's a significant societal cost. What about other criticisms? Animal welfare, health.
Big ones. Animal welfare groups have targeted them over practices like using gestation crates for pigs. McDonald's pledged to phase them out and reported being 96% done by 2023.
So some progress there.
Some progress, yes. Health impacts have been a constant theme. Phil Sokoloff ran ads in the late 80s attacking their food's fat content, and the famous McLibel case in London was a long legal battle with environmental activists over health and other claims.
I remember McLibel. Went on for years.
It did. They've also faced criticism over environmental impact, though they say they've worked on reducing packaging, and accusations of McFlation prices rising faster than general inflation.
People definitely notice rising prices.
Absolutely. And more recently, boycotts tied to the Israel-Gaza conflict have hit sales in some regions. It shows how global events can directly impact even a giant like them.
They're not immune. Product recalls happen too.
Yep. Shrek glasses in 2010 due to cadmium. Hello Kitty whistles in 2014, choking hazard, and even food safety issues, like an E. coli outbreak linked to onions from a supplier just this year, 2024.
That's serious.
Very. And legal battles over trademarks. The Big Mac name dispute with an Irish chain called Supermacs in Europe has been going back and forth for years.
It was complex.
It is. Plus navigating things like halal requirements in Malaysia, and serious allegations of workplace harassment in the U.S. and U.K. have surfaced, leading them to implement new training.
And you can't forget the high coffee case.
Liebeck v. McDonald's, 1994, probably one of the most famous and often misunderstood lawsuits ever, really brought product safety and corporate responsibility into the spotlight.
Absolutely. Okay, shifting slightly their marketing. It's ubiquitous.
It's everywhere, and controversial sometimes, especially advertising aimed at kids, but also huge celebrity endorsements. LeBron James was with Sprite for years, now Pepsi. They just announced an Angel Reese meal for early 2025. The BTS meal in 2021 was a global phenomenon.
The BTS meal was huge.
Massive. They even looked into advertising with NASA on an asteroid named Hamburger at one point.
You're kidding. Hamburger.
Apparently. And they do a lot of charity work too. McHappy Day, the Monopoly game donations.
Right. But there's also that darker side, the McRefugees.
Yeah, that's a sad phenomenon reported in places like Hong Kong, Japan, China, where homeless people use 24-hour McDonald's restaurants for overnight shelter because they have nowhere else to go.
Wow. It really shows how deeply embedded they are in the social fabric, for better or worse. Okay, let's pull back to the general health picture again. The sources are pretty blunt about fast food overall, nutritionally.
They are. The consensus is clear. A lot of fast food is high in saturated fat, sugar, salt, and calories. Just energy dense, but often nutrient poor.
Uh-huh. And the links to health problems.
Consistently linked to increased risk for cardiovascular disease, colorectal cancer, obesity, high cholesterol, insulin resistance, even depression.
Even depression.
Yeah, and studies try to control for other lifestyle factors, suggesting there's a direct dietary impact. The fact that so much of it is ultra-processed is likely a big factor.
Right. Highly engineered food.
Exactly, and the economics make it tough. Fast food is often cheaper per calorie than healthier whole foods, partly because of government subsidies for things like corn, soy, beef, carsi, the building blocks of many fast food items.
So the system almost encourages the less healthy choice financially.
It can seem that way. There's even research suggesting kids who eat more fast food tend to do worse academically. And documentaries like Super Size Me really brought the potential negative health effects into the mainstream public consciousness.
Yeah, that film had a huge impact. So it's not just about individual choice. There are bigger economic and nutritional forces at play. What about the wider societal impact?
Well, we mentioned the term McJob earlier. It even made it into the dictionary, defined as low-paying, low-prestige, dead-end work. That reflects a common perception, though obviously not everyone's experience.
But it captures a critique.
It does. There's been criticism about hiring practices, especially around teenage workers, how easily they can be hired and fired depending on school schedules, things Schlosser wrote about, and the impact on family meals. We touched on that, fast food replacing home cooking.
A major cultural shift.
But on the flip side, you see the incredible adaptability of chains like McDonald's. Their globalization strategy isn't just about planting flags, it's about localization, fitting into local customs, which in turn influences local food culture and eating habits globally. It's a two-way street, in a way.
Fascinating. Okay, so wrapping this up, we've covered a lot of ground, from ancient street food to this multi-billion-dollar global industry. McDonald's as this massive case study in growth, adaptation, controversy.
Yeah, and the real complexities around health, nutrition, labor, culture. It's not simple.
Not at all. And hopefully, for you listening, understanding this history, these dynamics, helps make sense of the food world around us, maybe inform some choices.
Absolutely. Seeing the bigger picture, the forces shaping what's available and what we eat.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Fast food is so integrated into our lives now. What's next? With technology like AI and automation, growing health awareness, sustainability concerns, global challenges, what could the next evolution of fast food look like?
Good question. How much will personalization matter? Or sustainability? Will it still be fast in the same way?
Exactly. What does the future hold for this industry? Definitely something to chew on.